Okay, we're going to talk about building a template. So an orchestral template is a really important part to doing any orchestration, any film scoring, anything like that. In an ideal world, you just open up an empty project and it's beautiful and clean and you're like, ooh, I get to explore all the colors and go through all of my libraries and native instruments and figure everything out. And that's just not really the most efficient way to do things when you are on a professional timeline. So what is a template? What you're looking at is a reduced version of my template, and it's actually not even routed fully correctly. So I'm going to show you how I would route it and actually route some of this stuff as we go. But basically, templates preload all of your instruments and samples so you don't have to spend time finding them every time you want to score something orchestral. So building a template is the balance of having everything that you need, but also keeping it simple enough to where you don't get overwhelmed or it destroys your creativity, because sometimes looking at really big templates can intimidate you. This is not even a big template. This is only 200 tracks. My main one is bigger, and I honestly don't even like working in it. I've come up with different solutions at this point. For templating, like pulling stuff from the template, but that's a story for another day. But the point is that I have a template that has everything in it exists. So, and also you also have to balance PC processing power. So doesn't matter if you're a Windows machine person or if you're a Mac person, you just have to have really good processing for this kind of stuff. And things to keep in mind are like how your processor reacts to the number of tracks that you're using. For example, in Cubase, every single track is actually directly aligned to a core. So if you have 8 cores, it's like, well, these first 8 are all on separate cores, but then the 9th one is theoretically using the first core again. So then you have that split. So those are things to keep in mind. Every audio workstation works differently, but your processing power is very much so needed. And there's going to be a balance there of how much can you load up and work with reasonably before you just destroy your processor. How much are you going to have to like keep disabled or frozen or whatever. So large templates as a whole require industry standard professional level machines to run them. In the early days, you can always get around things by freezing stuff, disabling stuff, rendering stuff to audio, because audio takes less processing than MIDI and all that sorts of stuff. But at the professional level, you need a template that's just going to be ready to load up and go. And the template may not load up instantly when you load it up, because there's a lot of things to load. It may be the kind of thing you wake up in the morning, you open it up, and then you got to go make yourself a cup of coffee or whatever while you wait for it to load. But once you're in, you're in. So entirely depends on your machine. So what does a template generally consist of? So it generally has all of your orchestral instruments, maybe with some extra stuff, with all of the articulations that you use regularly, or it's set up for easy key switching. If you are the type of person who uses key switches, I don't meet that many people that use key switches anymore. Most people use articulation tracks. But there's a couple different ways to do this. So I'm going to go over to my strings just because it's the main thing that it's the main part of the orchestra. It's easy to show off and it has the most articulations. So with your strings, I actually here have them as all separate instrument tracks is what they're called in Cubase. They could be called something else in your audio workstation. But I have them as separate instrument tracks, meaning every single one of these has a unique like sampler loaded on it, instead of having one instrument track with MIDI being routed to it, which actually is the other way of doing things, and theoretically could save on processing power depending on what library you're using and how you're doing it. But you got to just figure out the best way to save processing power. So let me show you first the instrument way. So right here, all these V1, these are my violin ones. So if you'll notice, I have violin 1 on legato here, right? Well, when I open that up, there's actually no other articulations possible here. And that's because I removed them. So if I were to load up BBC Symphony Orchestra as an instrument track right here, and I'm on first violins, I have all the other articulation options, right? Well, that's taking up processing power to load up all of these articulations on each individual one. And so what I did is I went through and I removed them. I don't actually remember exactly how to do it on BBC, but it's different for every library. But you can go through and you can actually remove them one by one, remove the articulations, and only keep the ones. Is it there? Yeah. Go to edit, and then you can delete them, right? So like I can delete all of these articulations that I don't want, so that they're not loaded up on this instance of the instrument, which means it's saving on processing power, making things easier. So when I have my legato, my longs, my pizzicatos, spiccatos, shorts, etc., then I have everything loaded that I need. I have a cute little naming scheme here where anything that has an asterisk is indicating to me, hey, there's an alternate version of this articulation loaded there, but the one you're on is the default. That's like a setting I did for myself. So like my legato, if I open it up, it's just legato. But if I go to my longs, well, we've got the longs with the consordegno, we've got the long flautandos, we've got all of that. Same thing with the pizzicato. We've got pizzicato and Bartok pits under the same window. Spiccato, we've got shorts. So spic is my default, but I actually have all of the shorts here in one thing. So spiccato, staccato, spiccato, consordino, and short harmonics, all of that together. So that method has allowed me to have like 4 instrument tracks. I mean, not 4, 7 instrument tracks loaded just for the violin ones. And then I went through and I did that for essentially every single instrument in the orchestra, which is how we're getting close to 200 tracks, right? The other way, I'll demonstrate this really quickly. So let's use a different library for this. So this is another library that I use, which is the East-West Composer Cloud. So one of the other ways is, let's go to strings really quickly. So let's do not fantasy strings, not strings to strings gold. So let's just go to first violins, and let's say we want, so we're going to need a legato slur. Let's do the light one because that one is a little bit easier on the processor. And then let's say we want a spiccato and a pizzicato. So I actually, in this instrument track, I have 3 different articulations. Now, when I play one, it's actually only playing the first violins because that's how my MIDI is set here. So it's set to the MIDI for 1. Theoretically, I could set this to 1 and it would play both. Or I could set them to omni, which means anything that's in omni is going to play all of them. But what you can do is, let's say this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. Right? So then I'm going to go ahead and add MIDI tracks that correspond to this. This is a little bit more complicated because you have to go ahead and find it. So let's call this East-West first violins here. So on my MIDI, I route it to East-West first violins, and you'll see here a number. So let me set that to 1. Let me set this to East-West first violins. Let me set that to 2, and then East-West first violins, set this to 3. So now I have 1 instrument track, but 3 MIDI tracks routed to it. So when I play the 1, it's going to trigger the legato. When I play the 2, it's the spiccato. When I play the 3, it's the pizzicato. And so I would just name those appropriately and know what I'm doing there. So you might ask the question, well, why does this save on processing power? And it's my understanding that it does save on some processing power by having only 1 instance of Opus open, as an example. So there's only 1 instance of Opus open here, but we just have MIDI telling it which one to play. And so that saves a little bit. We're nitpicking, but sometimes you got to nitpick if we're really trying to save processing power, especially if we're doing real-time processing stuff that's really heavy. So this is, it seems like it's the same thing as having multiple instrument tracks, but it's actually MIDI routed to 1 single instance of the instrument loaded. So those are your 2 options, and then key switches are your other option. So I think most people know what key switches are, but I don't super love key switches, but let's just go ahead and close all of those. And let's see, key switch. So violin 1, key switch master. So key switches basically function where you could just have one instrument track. And when you're playing, you have to play or trigger the key on the bottom there that tells you which articulation you're going to. So that's sus max, that's sus marcato light, legato slur max, etc. So those are your options for setting up your instruments within the template. So you're loaded up, you're good to go, you're ready to go at any moment. Okay, so if you have your articulation set on different tracks, you may want to consider pre-writing some of your CC automation data. So for example, if you're using 2 different orchestral libraries, which is very common, it's very common to blend multiple different libraries together to get a huger, more like cinematic Hollywood film score sound. They often blend stuff together. If you're using 2 of those, they don't always match perfectly. And what I mean by not matching perfectly is I mean they don't match perfectly in terms of dynamic. So sometimes you have to match it with your mod wheel on one, where one of them might be where you're halfway on the mod wheel, it sits there, but on another one, that level of dynamic might be way further up on the mod wheel. So one of the things to consider is the blend of how everything is blended, right? So a thing you can do to save into your template, I don't have it here, but if you want to consider maybe having some negative measures, you can do that in Cubase. I'm sure you can do it in all of the others, but basically I have a whole bunch of empty space before my bar 1 ever occurs. And the reason for that is so that theoretically on my legatos, I can say, okay, right before this, I want my modulation here and I'm playing it. I want my CC11 here and I'm writing it in, and my CC7 here, right? And so theoretically, I have all this data. You don't need all that data. Let's put it like, let's delete all of it except for like the first one, right? And it's like, okay, we just really need 1 dot. Again, saving processing power. So then I'm gonna have these 1 dot little things, and I've essentially preloaded. So anytime I play after that, I've preloaded the expression, the modulation, etc. that I'm going to start on. And the reason that's important is because sometimes your libraries aren't going to be at the same level, but sometimes even within the same library, your articulations aren't going to be the same. And so in an ideal world, you open up your template and your orchestra is balanced like a real orchestra, or at least balanced how you like it, instead of every time you play it, you got to just find the modulation spot and the expression spot. Now, again, this is a reduced version of my template. My huge template does have those built in. I'll be really honest with you. Lately, I'm so familiar with the libraries that I use now, I don't really preemptively put in any of that information because I know what I'm getting as soon as I sit down, right? However, it is a good idea to pre-balance your modulation, expression, and volume across the board with everything right at the beginning, especially if you're not super familiar with your libraries yet. So different libraries will interpret the articulations, the modulation, all of that kind of stuff differently. And you kind of want to iron out those details in the beginning. Great. All right. Gonna have a drink of water. You're gonna watch me have a drink of water, and then we're moving on to the next section. Okay, let's do it. So after we have that, we're going on to the real difficult part of the articulation. So let's say you're building your template. You're finally like, okay, this is going to take forever, by the way. And once you've got all your organization and all of your colors and stuff, if you're a color person like me, right, you got to figure out what colors you're using to determine, like, what is a bassoon? Well, wind is blue to me, so bassoons are low, so dark blue, you know. You don't have to figure out colors. You don't have to in colors, but most people have some color organization to their instrument families. So I have strings with green, percussion is some variation of red, so it can be reds, pinks, oranges, even browns. Woodwinds are some variation of blue, and brass is some variations of yellow with orange and stuff mixed in. So once you get all of this in, once you get all of the articulations in, all of the instruments in, everything that you need, which, by the way, everything that you need often includes like a solo flute and also your like group flute, right? You need multiple flutes in a group at the same time. So you have to decide what of those things do you actually need and what do you not, and what do you have access to and what do you not. A really common one would be like solo French horn versus having a French horn group. Okay, so after you've done every single articulation and every single instrument, you're going to need to bus the sections. So before bussing the whole sections as a whole, see all of these? These are all violin 1, right? I actually don't have these. I'll show you if I can pull it up on my screen here. So I actually don't have, let me look at the routing. Yep. I don't have these going to a single bus that is first violins. And I should, but this is a very quick template I made from my main one. So all of these theoretically should be going to one bus that is all of the first violins. And I'll show you, on Cubase they're called groups. Make sure your groups and buses are stereo. But I'll show you why this is important. Because if we have all of these, and I have to keep pulling this up to the other screen. All of these are going somewhere, but I need them to all go to the first violins, right? The reason I need that is so that when I make any change to the first violins, I don't have to make a change on every single thing here. I don't have to do all of my reverb sends or my inserts, my EQ, and my compression, right? I simply go to my group, where did Cubase put it? Put it down here for some reason. Obviously, in a real template, you would build that up. So let's say you would probably put it like right there, and you would color it some other color, right? So it's like, okay, here's everything, and all of these, you can see it will trigger. They're going into the first violin group, right? You can see the first violin group responding there. So the reason is so that if I want to say, for example, throw a 76 onto my violins, and before I throw a 76 into the violins, I actually want to do a little high pass on them, because violins, you don't really want all of that low stuff. So you do a little high pass, maybe a little stronger cut there. Instead of me having to do that on every single instance of the articulation and wasting processing power by loading up more versions of my 1176 and Neutron, I just have it on one bus that is the first violins. This will also help us later when we're automating volume. So if I need my violins to come down and they're moving between articulations musically, so for example, they might be playing legatos, but then they have some staccato short sections, right? Which is a very common thing to do in music. You don't want to have to like ride this fader and then ride this fader and then ride this fader and this one. You want to just have them all here, and that's your fader. You're essentially conducting it right there, right? So you're going to want to do that for all of them to where they are bussed or grouped, meaning sent to the same thing. So then you have first violins, second violins, third violins. You can go up to like your piccolo, right? Your piccolo articulations are all one thing called piccolo. Your oboes are all called one thing called oboe. You might want to split these. So like all of these are called solo oboe. All of these are oboes A3. Atre? Is that what it's called? I don't remember. But anyway, so the point is that you want all of that to happen there. And so you have a group for everything. So let's go ahead, and I'll just do this with strings as an example. Let me just go ahead, add a bus. Let's go, I'll just call it second violins. And again, you're seeing how long it's taking me to do this. Imagine when you're actually building the template. It's going to take you a hot minute. So second violins, and then I take all of these articulations, open them up, and then if you're using Cubase, Shift Alt allows you to modify multiple things at once. So Shift Alt onto the second violins. So all of these are now routed to the second violins. And then we can do the same thing here with the violas. So we're going to call that the violas group, right? Bring that up here. So violas group. And we need to grab everything before it. Violas. Open up your mixer. Route to violas. Let's do it with the cello too. So we've got stereo out, make sure it's stereo in as well. You never want to do something like make it mono on accident, right? Don't make your buses mono and then you're condensing everything. Which, fun fact, if you don't know this, most samples are already pre-panned to sound like they are on an orchestral stage, and typically you don't have to pan stuff anymore. You can pan them a little to make the panning more extreme, but in general, modern samples are pre-panned. So then take all the cello, put them into a cello group, and then go ahead and do that for, let's just do that for the basses. Go ahead and move them up here, basses. Okay. And I'm not coloring or anything right now because we're just kind of going quickly to get through it. So I have all my basses and I'm putting them into their buses, basses and buses. Buses and groups are the same thing. I think I already said that, but if you don't know, Cubase calls them groups. Everyone else on the planet calls them buses. So see, it's all triggering down there. Great. So all of your articulations are on separate tracks and you bus them to a single instrument for that so that you can make modifications across the board on them. Remember, I can just go to my cello bus and put any modifications I want on it instead of doing it across all of the articulations.